And welcome to Indiepocalypse Radio, your number one home for unmarketable indie games and all the people who love to make them. I'm your host, your erstwhile, your number one Indiepocalypse guy, Andrew, and I'm here with some guests. And can one of the guests talk very quickly, real quick?
Words,
yes,
mouth
Discord's.
words, memory times, saying
Oh,
things.
thank you. It's working. I didn't have to change anything except the output. I'm an audio mixing genius. Hire me to be your video producer. I know how to use OBS at a beginner level. I might lie and say intermediate if you have those drop down menus in your job application. But no, it's me. I'm your host. If you were just here a second ago, you're like, why is this guy talking like this now? He has a very different cadence when he's a host. Is that what it is? And the answer is yes. I do have a very different cadence when I'm a host. That was, if you're unfamiliar, that is my unofficial intro. Don't tell damnably records that I use. Drinking Boys and Girls Choir. Keep drinking as my intro. It's a very good South Korean punk band. I'm a huge fan of their stuff. That's a little taste into my. Anyway, I got two guests here. You probably know better than you know me. If the last show is any indication. But it's Kate and Zyba from, I'm going to say they're from Bit Show right now, but they're from a lot of things. They'll tell you the things that they are from. Hello, Kate and Zyba. You sort amongst yourselves who talks first. You're on your own. Good luck.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
We are here.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having. Yeah, good time. Happy to be here.
I'm recording. I'm doing everything properly. This show is on all cylinders. We don't have I don't have fancy production because this is primarily a radio show in spirit. And if I wanted to do a video show, I would be like I would want way more production. I'm very, very hard on myself in terms of like I understand it, but I'm like I don't want to do people and seeing the back of everyone's bedroom or their study or their office. I want to have a desk.
You don't like my wall, my wall with my DDR dance pad and my work of myself.
You have a very good Zoom background. It's got. I mean, neither of you have bisexual lighting, which I think is required for Twitch streaming.
Oh man,
my room looks like some sort of cube that has no exit, like I'm imprisoned here.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
like no door, window, or any visible exit.
You live in the panopticon.
You are living in that very standard Zoom dungeon that has no doors.
Zoom dungeon.
He's like, how did that person get to that room?
I get lowered in. I get lowered in.
Yeah, I can't tell the size of the room, the dimensions of it, how many walls it has. But
after I've done enough podcasts for the day, a rope comes down and I'm allowed to climb out.
Oh, perfect. That is, you're a modern content creator. So excited.
I've got some lighting, but it's not bisexual enough.
Not
Sad.
It's a very it's one of those things that
particular colors I need to have to
yeah.
Oh wait! Oh my God! Wait, perfect.
Well, I don't know why we're doing
got
this
my
is a radio
rainbow
show. We're
light.
spending all this time thinking about the coloring and lighting. Nobody can see us.
I know nobody.
Yeah.
We're not. We're
Right.
not visual. This is for the edification of myself.
Yes, exactly.
I also have to say I love I'm looking at your stream right now,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate the Isaacan gif. My favorite anime.
I've learned. I think we all have all three Isaacans living inside of all artists.
That's true.
And at some point, you inhabit one of them more than others. It's like I think it's a new version of two wolves live inside of you all. We all three Isaacans live inside us all. I've realized that just by force of the necessity of life, I am the tall Isaacan, as it turns out, primarily.
Yeah, most of the time I'm the short one with the hat.
I wish I was the short one with the hat. That is in my heart what I want to be. The high dreaming, but I'm like sometimes work needs to get finished. You know.
Yeah.
Sometimes
fair.
you need to break out your milk and put your glasses on your head
Break
and
out your
realize that
milk.
you must produce art.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, I
Yeah,
want to make games. I want to make art. I want to make money.
Yeah.
How can I ethically do that?
I don't know. I bet you do it a lot better than I do. I bet you're doing a lot better than I do already. You got to tell me. How do I make money? Tell me. You had like a video clip on one of those award shows. I saw you.
Yeah, don't you have a BAFTA?
I saw you in a nebulous art space at one point, talking about NVIDIA or something.
I guess my question is more like I do spend a lot of my time, not all of it, but a portion of it, trying to make my stuff marketable.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not bad or wrong.
No.
But I think I would have even more fun if I could spend less time thinking about that.
Yes.
And you're spending a lot of time just thinking in these spaces. You're more focused on the like, let's get the good shit out to the world so people can experience the good shit, and I like that. I don't know. I get pulled into this.
No, let's be honest here, Cyber. You were doing the practical thing. I am doing the wildly reckless, impractical, just like nonsense madness thing.
Yeah. So help me do more of what you're doing.
I wish I knew. I mean, I want to like. I have a lot of grand ideas, and maybe eventually I want to do a if you're familiar with Sufjan Stevens.
Yeah.
At one point, he started to do albums for all 50 states, and then he stopped at like 2. He did Illinois. He's like, good enough for me. And I'm like, yeah, I do like Illinois a lot. It's a good album, good place to stop, I suppose. But I want to do that for game development, kind of like an Indiepocalypse bonus issue for all 50 states. It's just like, how do I get people to pay me to be able to fund those things? It's the tricky part. And I've looked around, and arts funding, if it exists in the U.S., is labyrinthine at best. Yeah. And you need people there are people who probably have people who just apply for grants, and that's like the thing they do for their company or for other people.
I'm actually been talking with a small group of people about looking at some of the arts funding here in Cambridge right now, and there is looks like there's proposal. It's time to pitch for some outdoor public stuff. That Starlight Square in Central.
Yeah.
They're taking applications. I guess other stuff. I mean, there is interesting arts funding, I think, that is rarely approached, as far as I know, by game devs around here.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I think part of it is that there's not that middle space of the kind of artists that would get funded by grants funding usually in game development. It's kind of like you're either in your bedroom with $0 or you're like you've got funding, or you're ex AAA and you've got a war chest and investors and that kind of thing. And you've got.
I think it's. Oh, sorry, you go.
No. This is the number one rule of Indiepocalypse Radio: is if you're talking and Andrew keeps talking, just plow through him and they'll shut his mouth eventually.
I was gonna say, I'm not very familiar with looking at arts funding myself, so I could be totally wrong about this, but I do wonder if any of it also factors into the fact that so many people don't really know what games are. And I don't mean people know what a video game is, right? But so many people have such a predisposition in their mind of what a video game is. So many I feel like people who don't play video games just think, I don't know, video games like Call of Duty or whatever, and that's all any video game is. Because this was at least something that we ran into a lot when I was a student at WPI, was that God, we had a game development program, and still pretty much anyone who wasn't a faculty member of that program had no idea what the hell they literally banned they tried to give us a runaround on allowing us to have a showcase event in one of the newer buildings, because they said they didn't want any quote unquote murder simulators in their building. And that was the administrators of the school that had the game development program, right? So it's these are people that should know it. And I wonder I wonder if people who are if that at all extends to arts grants or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I've definitely found that when I did Hassel, it was extended beyond just it was time wasters is what they saw games as.
Yeah.
So it was to them, Call of Duty murder simulators and wholesome farming games are the same thing. They're just giant time wasters that you just repeat tasks or whatever, and then it takes 60 hours. And it's that's where a lot of disinterest comes from, in presuming that games they want to monopolize all your time, and that a lot of them are murder simulators. And I think maybe that's the old guard is very still in the murder simulator camp. And newer people who grew up with them, they're still like, well, they're still just things that take forever, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't want to spend 80 hours, even 80 hours either just like talking to a squirrel that wants me to go make him a rutabaga, and I don't want to spend 80 hours being a military man running around murdering other military men.
Yeah. I guess that's part of why it's probably so important though for game devs to like try and hunt down like arts funding when they can though. So hopefully it eventually maybe perceptions can change. I don't know.
No, I did a show in Ohio that was in a museum, you know.
Oh wow.
And I got paid money.
That's great.
I got
this is why I think doing stuff like the
oh my god, who's this?
So important, right? Oh yeah. I'm also high
oh my
on
god,
here.
who's coming down the ramp?
It's my god, it's Chris with the steel chair.
That entrance music, it sounds so familiar.
I've thought a lot about what my entrance music would be. I have no idea.
Okay, well, let's get into a sidebar about that in a second. After you get to your important point.
But yeah, so my point is just that I think it's really important that we are out in front of different audiences, right? And that's why I think the flea market stuff, even if you're not making a ton of money selling games, because the people who are there are maybe not interested in buying games or don't know that they're interested in buying games, but just being out there and talking to people, it's very apparent that people just don't know that these types of games exist, right?
Normalizing games.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, normalizing indie games or normalizing games as art as opposed to games as mass market entertainment it's actually surprisingly important and necessary because within our circles it seems so obvious, but most people just have no idea. They don't know that one person can make a game at all.
Especially because I think games as a medium are just so new. I mean, like I know I don't have to tell y'all that, like, because y'all most of y'all are way older than me, but like no offense, but but it's like I don't know, like I think like if I recall correctly, and I don't know so much about the history of movies, but like think about how long it took movies to become like a normal like thing, or like the idea that movies like could be like really high art to the general public.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, it took a while, and like games are like way younger than movies and have been like progressing in terms of like, I don't want to say in terms of quality because like it seems like kind of, I guess, derogatory to like early movies, but
you don't like that train coming at you? You're not a fan of the horse?
It's like those ye old cat videos. But like games have been like increasing in like terms of technology and like techniques and stuff exponentially. Like the ability to make games on even just on your own now I is completely different than what it was like, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think with that, with games really suddenly becoming a medium and then really suddenly becoming like a popular medium and then really suddenly becoming a really like effective medium for all different kinds of experiences and things, also comes with the unfamiliarity of like, I don't know, people who are like older, or like even not necessarily like older, like even like people who just like grew up with more rudimentary stuff like, you know, the NES and like the Atari. Like it's it means that people aren't as familiar with it and it's harder to like shake the perception of, I guess, what they initially thought it was.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, because when I was at Last Ad Hassle, I was talking to someone and she was like, she works at the Brattle, and she came up to me because I think I was wearing like a house shirt, and we talked about art house cinema, and it was like, oh, I don't really play video games. And then I was like, well, it was a thing, like video games are just like, they're just another art form. It's like, I guess I hadn't really thought about it like that. There is that very much that preconceived notion. I think the democratization of the tools, like these very low rent, very cheap tools are like what are really going to be where like that art form, kind of like they were in film and every other thing. Like once it became cheaper and easier for someone to produce their own, albums or films, like if I can buy a camera and just shoot film,
Yeah.
That's where you get the indie film market from, and that's where you get the indie art from. So it's not gonna come from, like 20-person teams working on Unreal, it's gonna come from like one person working in Bitsy in their bedroom, Or
I think
like,
it's always going to be a more complicated space for people to create their relationships with games than most any other media, because of the varieties of ways games can be physically interacted with, visually presented, and whatnot. That you have to if you're totally outside of it and you want to find your relationship the way you consume games, you got to learn, like, do I like holding a controller?
Yes.
Do I want to move with a mouse? Do I love both? Do I want to play handheld games? Actually, this year there's a new kind of Rumble. Is that Rumble something that's interesting to me and I want to seek out? Do I want motion controlled games? And like, these aren't. There's so many questions. They're not all super important to get answered right away. But there's so many questions they can at least present to you to be answered at some point in your gaming experience that just are not there in such a big rainbow with other mediums.
Yeah.
It's so much easier, I think, to form your personal relationship and find your preferences within other mediums, because you can sort of get quicker to the part where you're like, I like horror films, I like this, I love my home cinema, now I want to go to the movies, and now I know 80% of what I need to know about enjoying this medium.
Right. Even like,
Yeah, it kind of gets to something Andrew was saying on the last show about how, I mean, with like a piece of music or with a film, you know, you press play and it's just on, and you can just absorb it and sort of passively in some cases. But games really do require you to be present and thinking about it, engaging with the work.
yeah,
Like I only maybe 4 months ago, I guess, started listening to jazz, and it's very easy to just like put stuff on while you're working and sort of slowly kind of become acquainted with the medium and find stuff that you like within it. Whereas with games, it really requires you to put time aside and focus on it.
right. Even in that specific example, I remember when I started when I started to kind of like get jazz, you know, when I was like, oh, I get why I enjoy this in some cases. I get what makes this one sound better than this one, but like that's not as apparent as like I didn't jump good in Elden Ring and I died, you know, and that's why I can't see the end of it. But I mean, we also take for granted how complicated controllers are.
Also, like, if someone says, like, in jazz, they're like, oh, if you're looking for a good place to start, here's this 40-year-old album that's absolutely seminal and brilliant, and it will still hold up in almost every regard. Probably even the recording will be quite good. And if someone says, well, one of the most seminal, you know, games is, you know, Super Mario 1, you got to play it. It's so dated in so many ways. The art has advanced, and it's harder to introduce people to these pinnacles, because, you know, to get people... You have to be nostalgic in such a shorter time frame to enjoy these older things in games. You don't have to be feeling like, I'm feeling some jazz nostalgia, I need to go listen to some Stan Getz or something. Like, no, that is absolutely prime stuff now.
Yeah, I think it'll, like, over time we'll start to, because I enjoy plenty of older games, and I think there is maybe, I think as the canon will more develop, and maybe the canon doesn't include Super Mario Brothers, you know, but like there's a lot of interesting work in games. I think, you know, age is just fine compared to like modern games, because there's like, you know, plenty of stuff is still full of like bad art style or like clumsy looking art styles and poor controls and everything. And I think some of them will age like, I mean, people still really like Link to the Past, and I think that game is like holds up perfectly well and that kind of thing. And I think there's a reason they've made so much, like, everyone plays it still, and why there's like that huge randomizer thing took off and became its whole own thing, because like, oh, here's this kind of like very foundational piece of like games as an art form or whatever, and it's kind of like how the pieces all fit together in these interesting ways and how they can interact with each other. And like, because there is like, for as high concept art guys I talk about, like I think there is also art and mechanics a lot, you know. It's not just like I told a good story. I think
also. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt at the end. I think games is also. It's kind of like the trifecta of like games, 3D animation, and comedy are like three of the things that are the quickest to age and the quickest to age poorly. Like where it's like. Like I did not grow up with.
So what you're saying is like the worst piece of art the most poorly aged art of all time is Blasto.
Yeah. Or Hoodwinked.
R.I.P. Phil Hartman.
Actually, I don't know how much the writing in Hoodwinked hold up, but like I remember seeing Hoodwinked as a kid and being like, "That's an amazing movie." And then like I looked at the trailer recently, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it looks awful." Right. And like, it was like at the time it was amazing, but I think it's like, I I find myself not in a unique situation because there are tons of people like this, but like sometimes like in games like I find myself in a situation where I grew up with like a decent amount of Nintendo games, but I mostly played on the Game Boy. Like I didn't have like an N64. Like the Xbox was my brother's. Like I didn't like so I mostly was just like putzing around with like whatever like Game Boy Advance game I had, and then like eventually a DS. So I missed out on a ton of like what are considered like absolute classics of of video games that I really only gained knowledge of through cultural osmosis. And I went back I'm going to be incredibly sacrilegious here. I went back in, oh God, I think it was like 2016, 2017. And I was like, I'm going to play Ocarina of Time for the first time. And like, I liked it, but like, I didn't love it. Like it was fine. I don't even know if I finished it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like because like I thought it was like, and I could totally see how like if this was like, if none of the other Zelda games that came after it, or like adventure games or whatever that came after it existed, then I could totally like and if I try to like transport myself back to that time, like I can totally see how like it made such had such an impact on people. But if you ask me if I want to play Ocarina of Time, or I want to play, I don't know, like Breath of the Wild, I want to play Breath of the Wild. But like so it's like it's kind of like, I'm gonna be sacrilegious again. This is 2 times in one tangent. It's kind of like classical music.
Okay.
No, I play the cello. And I played a lot of classical music. And for me personally, classical music is a thing where aside from a couple of like individual songs, like I like stuff by Vivaldi or whatever, but overall, especially stuff by Mozart, I find classical music like really, really boring, both to play and largely to listen to. But at the same time, like even though like I don't personally like it as much, I can really see how all of the building blocks of the stuff that I do like in music, in games, in whatever today could come from there. But at the same time, I don't have like this, I guess I don't have this pedestal. There's stuff to be learned, but also I feel like sometimes it can be idolized, and I feel this way about classical music as well.
So you probably also don't like, not a big Eternal Sonata fan.
Don't worry about it.
But
I don't know if this is a dumb question. Is there classical music? Is there cello music that's not classical?
oh yeah, they're still putting it. Oh, I was gonna say depends if you just find classical as a genre or a time period, right?
Interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like, oh man, like I'm getting such a throwback to all my time playing. Like,
does that mean classical is a word just like retro, which could either be the time period or the style?
Yeah.
Is retro art classical?
Or like, I mean, classic rock, right? Which is like, is it just music from the 60s?
Oh, Nirvana.
70s, or is it? Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they play Nirvana on ZLX these days, so I don't know if that counts.
Also, to answer your question, Chris, there's a surprising amount of composers who are just like, here's an orchestra tune, it slaps. I wrote it yesterday. Here you go. Like it's like, and it's like apropos of nothing. Shout out to anything by Soon-Hee Newbold. Simple, but wow. Listen to Iditarod and tell me you don't have an emotion.
Yeah, like Bandcamp routinely does like best classical of the month,
And it's like, and like she wrote that in like 2015 or whatever, and I played it like 5 times in orchestra because every orchestra conductor was like, we're gonna play Iditarod because it bangs. Like anyways. Oh man.
Yeah, language is a tricky one, It's like it's why I personally don't like I occasionally I try to avoid the term retro and try to sometimes use the term lo-fi to refer to like lower resolution games that like work on like lower res pixel art because it's not necessarily invoking nostalgia, in the same way not everyone recording on a tape deck is trying to evoke older recording styles.
I mean, lo-fi seems like a very loaded term for different reasons.
Yeah, listen, there's all terms are loaded. You can't unload a term, But I also use lo-fi often as I'm a fan of lo-fi. So I am the kind of person who views it in a more positive light. But that's
Actually, this reminded me of a question that I had earlier, which is, do you know like what the breakdown is of what tool people have made games in for Indiepocalypse? Like, are most games predominantly made in Unity or GameMaker or?
I didn't see a single Unity
Bitsy.
splash screen last month.
no. Let me
Now
let
you
me.
can just it's just a checkbox for it now. I think, right? You can just turn it off.
Not if you're not pro.
Yeah, and a lot of these people I think are not pro. So there's a lot of Godot because Godot is free.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot of RPG.
I think
Maker.
beyond being like free, it's
Yeah.
free. What's the free as in beer versus free as in like? I mean,
Each.
the whole idea of it is to be free and open. And
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Right, except you want to publish on consoles, then it's like 10 grand or whatever
And grant to
That's
who?
not-
to whoever owns Godot.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
That's
Huh.
weird.
I mean, they
Wow.
probably need to license stuff.
Yeah.
From so it's not like they're charging you; they're just taking the money.
It might
to
be
pay
it
to-
might be 5 technically. I don't remember.
I really don't remember how that works.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm not-
remember because Sony wanted to charge me 10 grand. I think Sony was going to charge me 10 grand to use Unity on the Vita.
Dang.
Huh.
Near
But
the
not
end of the
other-
Vita's life cycle, so I noped out on that one.
yeah. So like RPG Maker, Ren'Py, Twine, Bitsy, custom engines. You know, I think the Catamites did it in Shockwave, made their game in Shockwave.
Oh wow, God, I forgot about the Catamites. Are they still making
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, they made a game for the Koosh issue.
Oh hell yeah!
That's on the screen right now if you're watching online. The guy with the microscope, that's the Koosh collab. They made a Russian satire game with a Russian artist.
Sorry. Have you ever had a VR game in Indiepocalypse?
No, I can't play VR, and I tell people that. So
Fair enough.
I'd have to be able to like understand the VR from just like watching videos, you know. But I don't have like a VR setup. My computer may be able to run it, maybe. I don't know.
I got a crappy one you can have if you want. I got an old Windows that I've loaned to Chris for his
Yeah,
Vita setup.
that thing worked great.
Wow.
It's awesome. You don't have to like punch holes in your walls to use it or anything.
It's a Windows mixed reality, which as much as I'm not really a fanboy of VR, period, but
Yeah.
I'm a fanboy. I don't understand why Windows VR flopped because it's more like a USB hat. You don't have to set up shit all over your house. You just put the USB hat on.
I just love the phrase USB hat. Oh, that's really good.
Anyways, Andrew, if you're interested in VR, I've got an extra one set in my closet.
Yeah, I think I've only ever had one person submit to VR, so that is not a pressing concern.
I mean, I think VR is or at least was a space where people were doing a lot of really interesting stuff because they were just experimenting and
Yeah.
putting games on Steam for $3 because you just had this one idea and you captured it in a game that is fun for maybe 10 minutes. And how else do you sell that thing?
Right.
So that was a lot of my early VR days was just buying super cheap, single mechanic projects on Steam and checking them out. That was very fun.
I
We
think
were
the price
originally
of
going to do
failure
the Call of
of
Karen in VR. Oh, sorry, you go.
Listen, I think like I was saying earlier, a lot of these small games cut corners to just because they just want to express an idea, not polish it out, and the cost for cutting corners in VR, I think, is often just too great. It overwhelms. It's hard to successfully express your idea when the end user is struggling to receive it in that medium.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what that's why a lot of them use like prefab engines, that's why the popularity of things like Ren'Py and Bitsy and RPG Maker and all these things are like, well, what I want to do, the engine does a lot of the work for me and it's built for me to easily do the work. So like the corners I would cut, well, I don't have to cut them because the engine already did like half of the work that comes to building a game was already done for me. Or they use a lot of Unity plugins and that kind of thing. And I think that's like a great way for people to like, oh, I can make more art faster now. And I was talking to Nice Gear Games last week. They've seen a lot of Japanese indies use what is in the U.S. called like Pixel Game Maker, I think, which is like made by Katakawa, who also makes RPG Maker. Or Katakawa publishes it. I don't remember the developer publisher relationships, but the because that's like making 2D like shooters and platformers and that kind of thing. but it's like the same idea as RPG Maker. And I wonder if that would catch on better in like the US as a way of people just like, oh, I want to make an action game. I want to make my own Tohos. And that's a way to make them. And so you can make like faster, you can make games more rapidly because all the busy work is done for you already.
Yeah, there's something about having something keep on target. The limiting of potential of what you could do. You could be like, with a tool like that, there's a certain set of things it's good at, and you're really obviously fighting upstream to do other stuff.
Yeah,
and that can just help keep you on target. Because I know, I'll be making something in Unity, and I'll be like, well, it would be a lot of work, but I could wander off in this other direction for this one effect that would be kind of nice, and then I can just spend forever doing something overly specific and lose the forest, lose the trees through the forest.
If you're using RPG Maker, you're like, I'm not learning Ruby. Forget that.
Yeah, that reminds me when I went to WPI, there's a professor there, Professor Moriarty. He has his own game engine that you have to use when you're doing his classes. It's called Perlenspiel, and it is just a grid. It is a grid, and you can control things in JavaScript. And it's like, and the maximum amount the grid can get is 32 by 32 pixels. You can make it smaller. You cannot make it bigger than 32 by 32 pixels. And there's text that you can make appear at the top of the screen. You can change the colors of things in the grid. I think you can put characters on the individual squares of the grid. But that's all you can do. So it's like, it's meant to be like, it's meant to like, encourage you to think outside the box in terms of your game design. But I know a guy, Vincent Miller. I think he works at Pocket Gems now. Although I haven't talked to him in a while. That man was a lunatic. Like he, if for context, you've got your 32 by 32 grid. He got it to run Wolfenstein. Called it Wolfenspiel. He got a 3D game running in it. Like,
oh, yeah.
I can't. I
would
love to be able to program good.
I always forget about Pico 8,
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Very
joy
Pico
of
8,
defying
very
the
Pico 8.
perceived limits.
And there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people still making games in ZZT.
See, whenever I do like my own like games and I'm doing game design, it is limited, but it's not limited by the engine. It's limited by my programming capability.
Right.
And my 500 line if statement that I did one time, 2 times, I did twice.
Well,
Don't do that.
If it's true, that's all that matters,
It's the worst thing I've ever done, but it worked perfectly.
Tangent to Moriarty. Have I ever told you of the day I met Moriarty?
No, please share.
It was, not to build up too much, but it was a long time ago. I didn't live in Boston. I barely was in games. I just sort of started out for myself. I fly to town to a conference. There's an after thing. I'm drinking. Everybody's drinking. I know one person, Darius Kazemi, I'd met him, and he waves me over. He's like, hey, here's this guy I'm talking to. Here's this guy, Brian. And it was Professor Moriarty. I had no idea who he was or anything like that. And he just sort of looks over at me very seriously, and I have my sloshing blue martini drink, and he's like, "Are games art? Go." And I guess I took the yes stance and mumbled, I don't know, something with all the confidence of a Dunning-Kruger idiot who just sort of started getting into games. And what I didn't know was he was actually using me as a whipping post or something, because he was practicing for his upcoming GDC keynote talk about how games are not really art. And so I mumbled out some coherent thing, and then he just had he wasn't mean about it, but it was actually really fascinating because he had been, first off, he's a professor, his life is in it, and he'd been recently preparing for this huge public speech, and so he just sort of danced around me in this beautiful display of it all. It was actually quite joyful. He didn't make me feel bad about it, but I really was an idiot who stumbled into sort of an intellectual level I had no business playing in.
That's so brutal. Yeah, I love Moriarty.
I've run into
a
few times after that. He's a very nice guy.
Yeah, he's a great dude, but also that sounds like pitch perfect, like exactly what I think. Oh man.
2 years later, I was when he gave this talk, I was a volunteer at GDC, and my job was to actually work the door at his
Oh, wow.
at that talk. So I was badging people. You can't come in unless you got a badge. He remembered me. He said hi and everything. Went to give the talk. But he came out to me and he said, "Here, this is the CEO of." It wasn't Bobby Kotick, but it was like some of the head of like. It was the head of some. I don't even remember. It was like it might have been EA at the time or something. It was absolutely huge. And he was like, "This is my friend, the head of this giant company. He doesn't have a badge. Could you see about getting him in?" And then he went in to give the talk, and I'm out there like, we are drilled so hard when you become a volunteer. It was like, no badge, no entrance. You tell them this, and it was sort of like, the speaker of the keynote just asked me to get the CEO of this major gaming company into this, and so I was just like, no, and yeah, you can go buy a pass, single one at the front desk, and he gave me some nice speech about how it's like, I run a major organization, and I can appreciate that you're just doing what you're told, something like that. It was a weird.
Wow. Oh man, like I 100% agree with you, Andrew, about everything you said about how it's rough that like you how it's rough that like people are expected to make this pilgrimage to San Francisco to mill around with a bunch of people, and it shouldn't be necessary. I 100% agree with that, and also GDC is the reason that I got a job, or
Right.
my first job.
Well, I mean,
But
that was my caveat. I said if you want to work for a
Yeah.
company.
no, that's a good point. And also, I almost got kicked out of a bar there, which is really exciting. Because I was doing a writing competition. But because at the time it was like, at the time I was I was like 20. And I was there as like part of the GDC narrative competition or whatever, which is where they have a bunch of students from like game schools, or not even necessarily game schools, all over the country. They write a big long essay about like dissecting the narrative of each game, and or of like a game they pick, and you send it in. And Richard Dansky and I think some other people, or Richard Dansky's like the guy who writes all the Tom Clancy games, judges it. And if you do goo, then like 20 or 30 people, they get a pass. And also you make a poster and you stand next to it and people ask you about it. So I had done that. And he walks up to me, this guy, and he's like, are you going to Write Club later? And I'm like, when is it? And he tells me like where and when. And Write Club had been was I for context, I was losing my mind about it because it was something that was talked about very frequently during one of the classes I had taken at WPI, which is a writing class. In fact, they had us do it as an exercise. It's like it's like an improv writing competition, basically. It's very brief, so that they give you like a prompt, like, I don't know, like what should the next like major first-person shooter game that takes place exclusively in Kentucky be called? And you have to like write a funny answer. And the problem was I did pretty well in the competition. It was like 30 people, and I actually tied for fourth. But the problem is, in San Francisco, once the kitchen closes, you are not allowed to be in a bar. And through a series of sitcom level blunders, while they were going around kicking everybody out, they missed me. But the security was still very present, and I was so full of tomato anxiety in the entire time. It was a lot. It was very much.
Yeah, I get there was a certain, in my first GDC, there's a certain I don't know if this is the point where you felt you hit, because it's little, but I felt like I networked to above my ability to exist in that sphere. I was successful enough that, like, I just come out of a master's, but I didn't really know anybody in games. I didn't know Boston, and I just worked. I was friendly to reps, and I got invited to this or that, and I found myself that year at the big Microsoft party, which was a great thing. That's like this. But I was like, yeah, I want to get into the big party. Once I got there, I realized, like, I have no context for talking to most of these people. My life is so different than my experiences are so different, and it's such a big, loud party that I just felt like I networked beyond my ability for it to be useful to me. And it was a really weird, good and bad. It's like, yeah, I got here, but the ambition And I think sort of some of the value of GDC to me has been going and figuring out, observing to see how do people interact with each other, what are their values, what are their purposes for being here, what do they get out of it, and are those things that I want to get out too? Because even just identifying like, I don't want these things that these people want. I'm not here actually for this job or talk to this publisher, frees me up to search for like, I am here to try and find something I intellectually connect with here, or to meet a person who would also care about the same things I do. And the people who care about what I do aren't going to be here. They're going to be there. But it really took some fumbling and going to GDC and spending time being awkward, not knowing what I was doing there. And I think this sort of gets to your point, Andrew, about like it's not desirable. It wasn't cheap and it wasn't quick, and I had the luxury of time and money to go figure these things out. It's unfortunate that that's a gatekeeper for everybody. But if you can get through those gates, and one of the reasons things I did originally was I volunteered for several years, so I got a free pass. Still, it's time and travel, but there is a lot of value to it. It's not a quick buy a ticket, get return on investment right away.
Yeah. And it's also like, it depends if that's kind of like, it leads you down a very specific, like GDC is a stop on the way down a very specific style of road that I don't think like everybody wants to, like, that's not the kind of road I want to go down as a developer. It's like, I'm not interested in that sort of like, I personally don't have the skill set to get hired at most. I mean, I perhaps could, as like, I've definitely recently applied to places, including the joy of applying to a place and having people be like, oh wow, what a toxic work environment. I'm like, oh, I just applied to work there. What a treat I'm looking forward to. I can't wait to never hear. Luckily, not hear back, but
part of it's you make GDC, and part of it when you show up, you are a part of it. You can in a small way tilt it. Like you do so much work to tilt the games industry with Indiepocalypse and everything. I guess I'm a little surprised you don't see any opportunity for yourself to influence what GDC is. Is it just like you think it's too big or on one track?
Well, it's like I mean, I often wonder, like, I remember there was some meetup group or something that was like a games industry event, but games dev meetup, but you have to be within the games industry. And I had this question, is like, am I in the games industry? And my answer is no, I'm not in the games industry. I don't fit into like I don't have like my budget is tiny, near non-existent. I have like little to no impact, very little public standing. So it's like I'm not in the industry really. So what do I do at GD? Let's say for instance GDC. You could, because that's like a very it's a trade show. It's like a corporate trade show. It's not like a convention. So
it's very different than, like, I've been to E3. E3 had no humanity.
Right. But I mean corporate trade show in terms of like, this is where corporations go and they network and they talk to each other, as opposed to like a PAX, which is like, this is a public facing convention for people to sell wares primarily. So I know where I go to like a convention because I'm selling wares. But what do I do at a GDC? Like I have very little to offer to the average game developer who goes to GDC. I think so.
I don't think that's true. I think you could find a lot of kinship conceptually, and a lot of potentially enlightening or challenging conversations. I'm not a huge advertiser. I know GDC's got problems. I'm not going this year. It's a big thing, but I do think I could picture you, if you wanted to, having at least step one. I could imagine you having a good time there and meeting interesting people and having good conversations. And I can imagine a lot of people. This I can be clear on. I know there would be people there who would be very happy to have had you and your thoughts be part of their experience at GDC.
Yeah, but I'm also very mercenary in a way. It's like, does that turn into money, or does that turn into that person even talking about Indiepocalypse publicly? Does that
not in the short term? It's not something you can bank on. No, these are long-term bets, long-term gains. They're sort of mind changers. I don't know.
Yeah. So for someone who is working functionally 2 full-time jobs, the idea of like, well, I have to go and be friends with everybody so that they will support my thing as a work acquaintance rather than as the work itself. It's a lot of thing I don't have time for,
Well, Well, there's also something about, I mean, a long-term game you could be playing with Indiepocalypse, not to be backseat coaching business stuff you don't really care about, but like, going to GDC, talking about it, it's small, giving presentations about it, that's helps establish some social proof and groundwork, and
Right.
just detritus around the world when someone who's looking for, say, an art project to sponsor or to give to, or like you apply to an art funding grant just to have left a trail in the universe of stuff you did. GDC is one of the places you can
Right.
leave a stamp of I was here, I existed, take me seriously.
Yeah, it's also across the country and very expensive.
Yep, that's all
Yeah.
true.
Yep.
It's also like, what is it, like, I don't know, a month, 2 months worth of salary or something? Like, we're not talking
I've
pennies here.
I've never bought a full pass. I've been
Sure.
fortunate enough to find other ways. You volunteer, or you get just the indie pass for like, I don't know, the price keeps changing. It's definitely sub 500 last I looked, which is still a lot.
Yeah, I can go to whole events for $500.
Yeah, and that neighborhood is, a cheap hotel in that neighborhood is not safe. It's got all sorts of problems,
Yeah. And like,
but I'm sure I'll do it again someday.
yeah, it's like, it's enough to harp on one specific event, but I just don't know if it is the event for me.
They do
Okay.
pay some speakers, so that's one way.
Oh,
to also-
they do that now. But like, do they pay speakers who are CEOs that are, what I mean?
They've paid me.
Yeah. Okay.
Ooh. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live in this very mysterious space where, despite how much I talk, I actually am quite a bit of an introvert. Going to big things and talking to lots of people like completely wipes me out. And also like even sometimes going to like smaller things. Like even I love like running Boston postmortem like meetings. Like I love doing Boston postmortem. It's great. After a Boston postmortem meeting is done, I'm like, all right, and it's 9 p.m. and it's time to go to bed. I get very tired. I like talking to people, but I do not in any way gain like energy from it. Like so like networking, and I also I get anxious very easily. So like networking is always like such this big like, and now that I've like been like around at least like the Boston area for like a while, and like I've talked to enough people, it's like definitely a lot less of like a big thing, and more of and more of a skill I enjoy flexing because I consider myself to be pretty decent at it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I also like very much like get where you're saying when it's like, oh God, like it's a whole thing. Like it is,
Right.
it is
Right. And
really
it's like,
it is really a whole thing.
what do I really get out of it besides like, is it like this multi-year process of winning hearts and minds, and does it win?
Yeah.
Do I win hearts and minds more than like the smaller, like the Finji levels? Do I, or do they like, oh well, those are the indies, and this is a neat curiosity, kind of like this level of indie has been, where it's like, oh, we put them on free game blogs or whatever, but they're not taken seriously by the proper noun industry, and
I feel that.
because they don't make money, and they're not like huge budget things, and they don't like Sony's. You're not gonna publish this stuff on like the eShops and like PSN and stuff, because like it just doesn't fit into that market.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that because I was in most of like events I was going with the very concrete eventual goal of I would like a job at some point, like it's like I would like to like work at a company in the industry, or at least like figure out like some way to like be in like or like to work in games, but like at the same time, like it also like very much added another level of stress to it, because especially while I was a student, it felt like when I'm going to like this event, I'm really like only like I don't really have anything myself to offer. I am simply like like for lack of a better term, I'm like taking from other people, because like I at the time I'm just like a little gremlin creature making my own video games when I get the chance. And I am actually like really looking forward to like when when COVID starts to let up more. I am looking forward more to now to going to more events, because it feels like I will like have something to give back more to the community. But also it's also weird because I would never tell any other student that. Like I would never say I would never say that to like anyone else. But I I basically I really feel that idea of like, I don't know, like what you were saying about like even though I like, I guess it's up to your own personal perception of it. Given all the work that you do for the indie game dev community, I would consider you to be in the industry, but I guess it depends on what you define as in the industry.
Right, and
Like,
bear in mind, I'm also a born and bred New Englander, full of all sorts of New England self-loathing. You know.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. But like, I guess like I feel that even though even though I disagree with it in your case, I feel that about like what am I like, do I belong here, and like what like I guess like what can I offer here, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of it has to do. I think this all changes if I personally have way more wealth. If you add a couple zeros to like my initial offerings and my commission rates, if you just tack a couple zeros to any of those, suddenly I'm actually very important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess part of it is I wonder is like, whose toes are you worried about stepping on, right? Like if you're like, oh, I don't fit in this space. Well, they grabbed a big namespace, game development, or these meetings, whatever it is, and like, if I don't respect, if they don't think I don't know, like, I want you're doing this work to change perceptions. You're going into spaces like flea markets and trying to change a perception of what belongs here. And I think you have that same right. I wouldn't blame you for showing up in a game space like GDC or Indicate or something and being like, here's my idea of what belongs here. Here's what's good. Here's what the discourse should be about. Here's the kind of stuff we should be talking about and looking at. I think that's a great... I know that's not a mentality that's comfortable for everyone to take, but...
No, I have no issues with being... I am already aware that I can be mildly antagonistic at times, I have no particular, like... I mean, I was just... When I was talking about the articles today, I was talking about how some people who were like, oh, I love Indiepocalypse and this is so great, and then after I had aired some grievances with the way they talked about it, I suddenly stopped hearing from them because I took just like light issue with the way they present or the way they talked about it, because I am very the one thing I am very particular about is like, I don't like
Are you pausing for a polite way to find a way to name a racial group, or what was...
No, it's I think you said 1 second, which means you now get more of my automaton skills.
Musical interlude.
So I had to do some work real quick.
Okay.
Had to fuse work and all that. So the one thing I get very particular about and get like, generally I know this is not for everybody, what I do. And a lot of people are going to just sort of bounce off and go, oh, that's neat, or whatever. Like, it's independent art. That's just it. That's how it is in every medium. But I do get a little when it's like it's treated as like a fun novelty, or like a not something that's real, or like a... I kind of had like three instances like back to back of like someone being like, oh, this is just like the thing. This, someone at Indie, Super Rare was like, oh, this is just like Indie Mixtape. I'm like, what do you mean? You mean the thing that I made before you made that is just like the thing you made? And I was, and it was people being like, oh, calling it a community project, or just calling it a place for beginners and amateurs. And I got like, I got on a tear. So basically what I'm saying is I'm not upset with like, I have no particular issue with finding boats and rocking them around.
Do you see that PAX East this year? They don't have Mega Booth, but they said they rebranded. They're doing like a indie section, and they called it Indie Rising or something like that, or Rising something. They just from Rising in there, And then
Sorry,
they
I
had
missed
this
what you
whole
said. I
paragraph.
had to get up for a second again. Sorry, I'm in the middle of fixing something, sort of. So I need to get up and down. All of a sudden, that I wasn't expecting to have to do. You were saying I got what you said when you said, "Did you see PAX East?" And then I stopped hearing you.
So PAX East, they announced to have some like indie rising category,
Yeah.
or something for like support indies and to have a thing. And they had a paragraph in there that I thought was this really sort of sadly patronizing thing about like, hey, everybody needs some help on their way up,
Yeah.
doing which is it's this kind intended thing, but what it's basically saying is that these games are not they're not where they could be, they're not where they should be, they're not where they want to be, they aren't. They aren't fully formed. The people making them don't necessarily, they're working at this disadvantage, and I just think that was a real disservice to people who don't want the same outcome or output or life or anything for them or their games as these big AAA displays at PAX East to make it sound like you're either a little baby chick, or a chicken.
Yeah.
I may have exist as something else.
I may have been sitting at I may have been around an independent retailer of indie games at PAX East, and I heard someone selling the games talking about, oh, here's a nice little thing of games that are on itch that aren't good enough or ready enough for Steam, and that kind of mentality. And I'm like, you're actively selling these things. Like, what does that attitude have? And that kind of like, and that's the kind of thing that just like jades me. Like, oh no, this is what people think. Like, this is how, and this is someone who's like trying to promote these games, and like, oh, that's what makes me scoff at. Like, oh no, industry is all just like moneyed assholes.
Blar.
Who have this very particular. I'm gonna whenever I cut out randomly because I have to keep turning a
No,
breaker
this is
off.
super fair. No,
I have
no
to keep
worries.
turning a breaker off and on. Yeah, and it's just kind of like that's where like, oh no, that's the kind of thing that makes me say, oh, I do not fit in with like these groups, because it is the industry, as people refer to as industry, is people who have like, it feels like it borders on like a class thing sometimes. Like, oh no, these people have a lot of money, That's like, it's like they're just making products. They have companies. They have, like, it's just not a space that I fit in, that the people I work with and like the contributors I have fit in. Like, these are people who just like do not have, and it's like, and then the rest of the culture, the rest of like the market and all this is made to cater to the people who can like, pay console licensing fees and pay for all this stuff and have like hire community managers and have companies and like all these sorts of things, and that's what makes it feel like such a wholly different world,
Well, it is a bunch of wholly different worlds that are connected to each other. I mean, the way I approach it is probably different than a lot of other developers, because I did decide a long time ago this is my career, this is my 100% focus, that I'm doing. And so when I come up against something like a $500 console fee, like, to me, I do have to look at it in the lens of, this is my primary business, and if you're running a business, that kind of money is to be expected to be paid for things. This is a kind of hurdle to go through, and so it's not that my artistic aspirations and beliefs of what games are and should be are so much different from someone else for whom that fee is just out of the question. It's just that is where I have entirely focused my life energy for what I want to do.
Yeah. I mean, even getting to that point is like, it's a big advantage to even be able to have $500 to spend on something,
Absolutely.
Which is the kind of like the space that I'm sort of working in. It's like, I'm still in the mentality, like, the idea of something costing over $1,000 seems illegal. It seems like, how can something cost that much money? How it's like, it's inconceivable. That's like, oh, that's a thing you're going to pay off for a couple of years. But, it's.
I mean, and I don't know where we are in this year, because this was sort of 10 years ago when I was more in tune with this, and I was doing the same thing as a lot of people. It was a lot of indies, younger people who are a few years out of college, maybe they had a job for a little while, who've decided to spend a good chunk of their savings as this runway to try and take off. And that was the thing I just witnessed. I was a group of 6 people in Boston around the same time who had all sort of done that. We're all like, all right, quitting my day job, spending my savings on a couple years to try and do this, and that's exciting, and it's a huge privilege, and it's also it's a weird, terrible thing to compete with,
Right.
Because later on you're going these they're not funded by real or sustainable economics. You're competing against people taking these huge chances and throwing their lifeblood into something, and that's who I don't know. It's a weird, uncomfortable thing, but it's a reality. You can't stop someone from saying like, I saved up 5 years for my job, I'm going to quit and do it. You can be like, no, that's untenable. Like, I know it's untenable. That's my dream.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's the space and that's kind of the thing that I want to create a space for someone like doesn't have to spend 5 years on something. You know, they can spend like a weekend, or if they spend 5 years, they can still like, you know, as you're making your opus, you're writing your master novel or whatever. You can still submit to short fiction anthologies, but there are no short fiction anthologies in video games. You know, there's the one, and it's me, and I don't pay very much. And I'm trying to like carve out a space where maybe there's more of them. Maybe you can do it more often. Maybe there's like, I mean, the few that still exist are still very like walled off. You know, they're still invite only.
Yeah.
And like, or like very niche. And they're still like, I'm the only one that's still like, hey, you know, you could be literally anyone, you know, you could be some nobody cares about or knows about that has no online presence, but you made something interesting and you submitted it, and I'm gonna include it, rather than you're my friends who work at Riot or whatever, and like, oh yeah, you need a leg up, all right. Or you know, it's kind of like, I don't know, trying to make a different space for these kind of things.
I think it's super meaningful probably to a lot of earlier career game developers who want to believe in themselves, is to have someone like you believe in them and to demonstrate their worth, and to be able to say to yourself, I am now a paid published game author, I think is just highly motivating.
There's a startling number of people who I've given them the most money they've ever made off of games, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't give out a lot of money. But it's that feast or famine lifestyle.
Yeah, and like that is like one of the things that I love like the most about games is like, at least like to some degree, like there are a bunch of caveats to this, but like, you know, I have a bunch of asterisks here, but to some degree, like just like how accessible I guess games are like to make, in terms of that, like if you've got a computer, like, and like you've got an internet connection, like you can and you've got time, that's the other important thing, then you can probably make a game, and like you can probably like put it out somewhere on the internet.
Yeah.
But also like while there is like that accessibility there to like anyone can like make and / or like release a game, it is very much like you say, like a lot of like, you know, a lot of who makes the most money in game development, especially like I feel like when it comes to a lot of like a lot of independent studios, is like obviously, you know, some like there are people who you know, like who don't fit in these categories, but I feel like a lot of it is like, all right, like I was an indie game dev, but I already had like all of these connections or whatever,
right.
And like so I managed to like hook up with like a really good like marketing person, or like I managed to get a leg up with a publisher or whatever. Or I got stupid lucky, like, you know, and not to say there isn't like a, you know, a spectrum of people in between, but it is a shame because it's like anyone can make a game, but also like not any, like you don't always necessarily like hear from anyone who can make a game.
Right, and there's no like gigs you can work, you know, as a game developer in between. There's no, like making your own art. You can't like, there's no equivalent of like playing dive bars or whatever, you know, of like this.
I think there is a
contract
bit.
work is.
Yeah,
I have done a lot of contract work in the last.
Right, but that's like working for somebody else, you know. That's.
I mean, depending how able you are to, I mean, I get to decide for the most part what gigs I accept, you know. So
right.
I've really enjoyed, like, I've done some stuff with Northeastern University because I'm really interested in learning games. And so yeah, they were their projects that they'd already defined were going, but I heard about them and I was like, yeah, that is, you know, that's the kind of gig I want to play along with. And so
sure.
that was a win-win, you know. There are some like that if you Mostly for programmers.
Right, right. Yes, for like the generalist, who kind of like is sort of all right enough at everything to make their own games. Like, what do? You can't really like that. Doesn't transfer to jobs or employment very often because it doesn't have like you don't have. Never mind. Like, the Nightmare application is like not something new to specific to games where it's like entry level positions with 5 years of experience. It's like good luck there. But that has nothing to do with games. That's just like, industry. That's kind of like people just putting whatever they want on applications and not a game specific problem per se. But, all this to say is that I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't think I still sort of maintain that at the best going to a GDC would have some people be like, oh yeah, I know about them. Like weird that this thing that desperately needs people's attention, you know about that, but you never mentioned it. I'm just gonna head down to local Ace Chemicals and jump into the vat, as one does, and emerge truly Joker-fied.
Truly Joker-fied.
Because why? What is the benefit? Like I'm glad you. Anyway. I don't know. I think if I had more money, I would probably just like go or I would go to more of them because it's like, hey, worst case, I run my mouth and everybody hates me, but they didn't know who I was when I started. And it's not like it was really going to open a lot of doors anyway, It's clearly not a profitable model.
Well, I think a lot of what the reason there are a lot of motivations for why I've done a lot of different things to sell games and whatnot, but the ones that I just find I'm generally most happy with, and again, it's when I have the luxury to do this, is when I participate in things purely because I want to know more about what it feels like to participate in them. I want to know more about this space. And because that's one of the easier things to satisfy, is to go to an event or go to a place or engage with a group because I am curious about it and I feel that my life will be in some way better if I have more of an understanding of what this thing is that I'm on the outside of, because that's a box I can almost always tick when I walk away from a thing. Be like, there, I did it. I now know more what that is. And sometimes that'll have knock-on effects if I get another gig or I introduce to somebody or something like that. But I can never count on those. I can almost always count on I will understand more about the thing that I didn't understand about before. And
yeah,
that's a little Pollyanna-ish, but that's I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I my trick is I just go to shows that I would want to go to anyway. And so it's like if it's like a miserable experience, at least I wanted to go to TCAF or something. And I mean, granted, Toronto's also way closer. It's like which ones are close and which ones do I want to attend as events? And
you were talking earlier about going to the Hand-Eye
Society.
You said it really quickly earlier, and I swore you said hentai.
No.
Yeah, that was also
Sorry.
what I thought, and I was like, and then I had to think, and I was like, oh wait,
No, Hand-Eye.
Yeah.
Sorry, Hand-Eye. That northerner style of speaking very quickly about everything you're saying. No, Hand-Eye.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could learn a lot at a hentai.
I mean, you could. Like, I don't know.
You could learn a lot, but how much did you want to learn?
I don't know. I don't know your background. I don't know your history with the medium. But
oh man.
Anyway, we're cresting an hour on this show, which is where I like to close them down.
Time truly flies.
Yeah, time truly flies when you're
talking about anti-capitalism.
When you're like, yeah, or whatever it is, and
video games.
Right, video games.
That's if we're going to take anything away from this, I think video games.
Yeah, I feel like I need to talk about art completely excluding capitalism for the rest of the week to make up for how much time that capitalism has stolen from our lives.
No, it's not ideal, but whatever. You still got to work within the rules of it at the time being, I suppose, to the best you can, because food still takes that green paper.
It's true.
And
speaking of which, I'm gonna have food,
and we need to eat that to live. It's the unfortunate core of the human body.
If only I could photosynthesize.
If only we could.
It's not for lack of trying. Look at all this floral print.
Yes. But I usually hide cameras to create a level playing field mentally for me, so
Fair
that
enough.
other people can't look at me, so I don't look at them.
Fair enough.
To maintain the power balance, but
Thanks for having us on the show,
thanks,
Andrew.
Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for indulging my aggressive outsiderness and self-loathing.
A huge mood, to be honest.
Yeah. Maybe one day I will feel more comfortable and I will feel like I belong in industry spaces. But today remains to be not that day.
Fair enough.
You interview enough people, someday you'll show up at a meeting where the whole space is just full of people you've already talked to. And
eventually,
it's your space.
Eventually, I dream of the day that people
at Indiepocalypse Con.
That people, I don't want to run that, but I would love it if people are just like, your typical stuffy industry types with their studios and their producers. They're like, I don't like those Indiepocalypse because they're too loud. They cause too much ruckus. as like a disruptive force who has little respect for the ways of the industry or something. But who knows?
Dream on. I think the sad reality is you're just going to find yourself all too respected by those folks.
Yeah,
all too respected.
I'll take the empty, wholesome positivity, toxic positivity. I will eat up that toxic positivity like a chem cleanup crew.
You're gonna get someone who comes to you at the door and says, "I respect your ability to follow directions."
Yeah, I can't wait. I look forward to like the one day, like the one pledge drive, the one article, the one thing that like suddenly Indiepocalypse has money, and then all these people were suddenly huge fans of me all along. And I will be like, I can see the dollars. I can see you floating over to me with dollar signs in your eyes, like a cartoon character, like a cartoon duck. And I'm gonna say, no, thank you. At least be less obvious about your kind of like clear opportunism.
Fair enough.
Because I think that's the true divide. Is like, really, I don't have enough money for people to care. Primarily. I think if I had more of it, people would care a lot more. But I don't. So you have people being like, oh, it costs $4 million to make an indie game. And I'm like, buddy, let me tell you about games made in weekends on $0 budgets. And turns out, sucks that they're better than some of your $1 million games, I suppose. But that's just life. Nothing you can do about it. But you've got the power to have like a game announcements and games press regurgitating PR releases for you. So leg up on me. I'm the fool here. But anyway, speaking of fools, let's close out this cadre of fools. And before we go, Chris, I gotta know, what is your wrestling opening theme?
He's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone. Oh no, I'll never know.
I really love that he's gone, but he's like in the call.
Not
he's
anymore.
Still, his chair is here.
Oh, I see. I wasn't looking at that, so I didn't know.
Yeah, fair enough. He's it's just an empty chair. Like there's
no.
really something about it.
And then I accidentally minimized it, so it's doing that thing where it puts it in a corner, and I usually just hide it behind how do I? Oh, I guess I can just get rid of show video. That works too. Usually I put a window over it so I don't see it. Anyway.
Also, and I know that this was directly from my Twitter, but I do have to say, I'm glad you chose this image of me because it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, usually when I promote it, I do use people's Twitter avatars to kind of get like a visual symmetry across. Like, oh, I looked at this promotion, this announcement of a show on Twitter, and then I clicked over them. It's the same picture. And also, when I'm pressed for a picture real quick, I just go to Twitter. When I say,
oh, there you go.
When I say forget to ask for people's pictures.
I have a full version of this image of me, and also I made one of my roommate, and they're hanging up as portraits in the kitchen.
The picture of me is everything you dislike. That's from the Humble Bundle party at GDC.
Oh, nice, dude. Hey, tell someone at Humble to accept Indiepocalypse into the
Accept
store.
Indiepocalypse, yeah.
I submitted it like 20 times, and they're like, oh, we don't have enough space on our servers. And I'm like, I'm so sorry
everybody
for your
I know there
service.
quit.
Sad.
I'm so sorry. Could you delete one of the Call of Duty gun skins for me and fit
Yeah.
Indiepocalypse on there?
Uh,
And then eventually I just stopped doing it because it was like a waste of my time. But like,
know.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that makes me feel like, oh no, this is not for the industry. Because like, why would Humble reject it? I don't understand. Because it's like it's just a market. It's just like just a market. Why does it? Who cares?
They have they have infrastructure issues. Like they have funny things going on their back end. Also, I know this is recorded. I'll say that Humble's got a funny back end.
Sure.
If they tell you we're having trouble with our back end with this idea, they're probably not lying. They got a funny back end.
Well, I'm sure if I was Ubisoft, they'd find the ways to work through that back end. You know. Anyway, Kate, what have you got to plug? We're gonna shut this down. That's how I shut it down.
Oh boy. I'm gonna plug my Twitter. I guess I don't post there very often, but every once in a while you'll hear about Bit Show coming up. Boston
When does Bit Show
Postmortem
usually
meeting coming
air?
up. Oh boy, I
no
wish
usual.
I could tell you. Bit Show airs when we were like, hey, we should do a Bit Show.
Okay, so we say follow the Boston Indies on Twitch. It's a good way to get it.
Follow Boston Indies on Twitch. Follow me on Twitter at DragonDirigible if you want to see me get buried up to my neck in a snowdrift, I guess. Honestly, that's pretty much the vibe. At Dragon Dirigible, dragon like the creature, dirigible like the blimp.
Perfect.
One word. Zyba,
what have you got to plug, promote?
Play Block Pooper 9 on Steam. It's free, 100% free, no ads, no microtransactions. It's just a game I made just to exist. Block Pooper 9. It's rough. The UI is terrible. It's basically a 16-player Smash Brothers, but you're pooping out of your blocks out of your neck the whole time. That's it. So that's what I'm pitching. That's the most important thing in the world. Block Pooper 9.
Perfect. Just go there, get it now, shoot it to the top of the charts. Tell your favorite streamer about it.
Or at least get enough people playing it that Steam doesn't classify it as a suspicious thing it's still learning about.
Sure, yes.
Zyba, this is incredible.
Listen,
Why is there a fetus here?
I have.
That's the Bit Show desk on the Bit Show desk. That's a Block Pooper.
Oh my, yeah, I saw. I was like, oh my god, it all makes sense. I feel like I've learned deep lore.
I have seen at times I have watched at games that like, oh, I saw those at conventions for like 5 years, and then I'll look at their Steam charts when they come out and see they have 2 to 3 concurrent players maximum, and I'm like, yikes.
Oh man, I love this.
Block Pooper's in good company.
Block Pooper.
Block Pooper is exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Why is it called 9? That was the 9 there.
I kept opening Unity projects and accidentally closing them, and I was having trouble with Git, so the number kept incrementing.
Oh man.
If you actually get it in your library, there was a mistake, and the icon says, or there's a background picture says 10.
Is it a mistake or is it part of an
This is really like you really tickled me with this one, Zyba. Like, wow, I'm really. I love this.
So is it that, or is it part of an ARG? There's only really one way to find out.
God.
And that's to download it, play with all 16 friends for 16 hours, 16 minutes, and 16 seconds.
Do it.
For 9.
Across 9 gameplay sessions, and then you'll find out what happens when you boot it on the 10th session.
God.
For my part,
Building Relationships 1, Foundations of Love. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Wow.
I will say, you know where Indiepocalypse.com. It's where you get the Indiepocalypse, where you buy it. It's just, you can go somewhere. You can click a little things to go to Itch Store. You can check out the contributors there. You can check out where they're all from, what their businesses, go to their sites, check all their stuff out. Indiepocalypse.com/submit if you are a game developer and you're like, oh, I love to submit games to this thing and get anywhere between $20 to $70 on average. You can go there. It's guaranteed. You don't have to do any extra work even. You basically don't have to do anything except just go to Itch and like click a couple buttons, and then your game gets enshrined in everyone's in the 4th most popular indie game anthology on the internet. I'm looking forward to it coming the 5th and the 6th and the 7th then, because that'll mean progress for the forum.
Oh
But yeah, and then indiepocalypse.com/Patreon. If you're like, oh, I listened to this show, but I want to hear it. I missed it. I missed the initial raid, or you're like, you're part of the old Indiepocalypse hemorrhage from the raid, but you came back later. It's like, are they still talking about how he hates everything? And the answer is, I hate things because I love them. You know, it comes from a place of passion and love. But those shows are there, or you can just subscribe, and then you just get an issue every month, and you don't have to think about it. Cancel a couple of those true crime podcast subscriptions. You don't need those in your life. Let's be real, folks. Let's cut that voyeurism out and turn it into indie game money. Do people really need to? Anyway, I'm not going to go down that hole of like, do people need $30,000 a month to grossly joke about people's murders? I don't think so. It's kind of a
when you
gross
could download
thing.
a murder simulator and
You can download a murder. Yeah.
Those people aren't real people, so it's
Yep.
like infinitely better than voyeuristic views into people's personal tragedies.
It's true.
Anyway,
I'm so sorry. I'm slightly distracted because I'm looking at the reviews for Block Pooper 9.
Yeah, all the reviews are just a few people I know.
I'm obsessed with the one it's the best pooper since a Block Pooper 7.
Those are real games that were distributed around. The other Block Poopers exist. They just never made it really publicly.
yeah.
It really elaborates on the fetus subplot from Block Pooper 4. Oh my god, I'm sorry. You've really. Oh man, You've truly captured my attention with this one.
It's the joy of unmarketable games made for art.
Block Pooper 9.
Oh, perfect. And with that, we are
All
going
right.
to shut this show down. I'm putting my foot down on the button that says end show.
All right.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for this shockingly on topic in terms of games session of Indiepocalypse Radio. I mean, that's the thing I've realized, that's like, I noticed that, like, oh, none of the people who like contribute to the zine typically engage within the social media discourse cycle about games. And I feel like that actually says a lot about their approach to like game design, perhaps. And like, they're just like, they also feel like they're just like outside of this ecosystem, and they're like, why would I argue with these random developers about the map button in Elden Ring? Who cares about them? And that kind of like bizarre approach to art criticism and something like that. Maybe it's something I've been noticing more and more which is why I think maybe they don't talk about that stuff, and they're like, yeah, let's talk about food and other bizarre tangents.
Fair enough.
And indulge this thing. And anyway, shutting it down, scrolling over. because of the gentleness of the raid, I will not have an ending song. So you just play your own ending song you want to play to this after I shut it down. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye.
That's the ending song. Goodbye.